And I think the NHL's got to recognize that they're making record-setting profits, record-setting revenue, and we're in a situation here where, this is, it's becoming a star-driven league. Some people should keep that in mind.
All right, let's bring him on now. Bob Stauffer, the Oilers radio color commentator, host of Oilers Now on 880 Ched. And if you did not hear Bob on Oilers Now on Monday, go back and listen to that. This is going to be good too, but go back and listen to that. He was fantastic with Frank Saravalli. Bob, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, well, thanks, guys. I mean, we found out when the suspension was during the Saravalli interview, and I was shocked and dismayed that it was a 3-game suspension. I thought they were probably going to do 2. Outside chance they were going to do 1. I did a podcast yesterday with Biz and Witt, and we never once discussed the possibility of a 3-game suspension. So, yeah, that's what do you guys think about it? What do you think? What do you think, Pete?
I did not think it was going to be 3 games. I thought maybe 2, but I think that my initial reaction was this was a makeup call. They were tacking on something about for the Marcus Johansson thing, and they wanted to do some sort of, hey, look, see, we treat Connor just like we treat everybody else. There's a longer discussion to be had there, but
I wasn't that surprised. I really wasn't. And I was preferring 2. I wasn't shocked by 3. And the reason why I kind of justified 3 was a cross-checking incident involving Connor McDavid last season in the playoffs. He took one from Carson Soucy. They gave Carson Soucy 1 game, which for a playoff suspension, they typically, I feel like they cut it in half or go a little bit less than they normally would. Yeah. And that one wasn't quite as intentful, for lack of a better term, because he was pushed from behind and then took the cross-check in the face. And so this one was more of a revenge type situation for McDavid, which I get why they would tack on maybe a game or so. But this brings it back to like a bigger takeaway for me is that with McDavid and Myers both getting the same suspension, what the league essentially is saying is that it doesn't matter what happens to precede the infraction. All that matters is the infraction itself. Do you believe that that's the right way to approach it?
Well, first of all, Pete, I'm a little surprised in your take.
He's being a bitch.
I figured you would.
A bit of a bitch.
I figured you would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were all over the NHL Prime thing, weren't you, Pete? So there you go.
I was.
Those paychecks keep coming.
You get residuals on those, or what's going on? But with all seriousness,
I wish.
Yes, I thought of that incident, and it was a tough one for me personally because I know Carson Soucy. I played against Carson's dad, Mike. I go with Jerry Johansson as agent out to Irma once a year for a golf tournament, and I like Carson so much that when he was with Seattle, I was kind of hoping that maybe the Oilers would make a move for him. But in the sequence that the game was over. Connor McDavid was not pushed into Carson Soucy. He was cross-checked by Nikita Zadorov into Carson Soucy, and Soucy cross-checked him right in the face, and was frankly lucky that there wasn't a lot more damage than McDavid. And it happened, as the clock was winding down. This one, I looked at Garland, and what Garland did from a gamesmanship perspective, and if you're a Canucks partisan or you're playing against McDavid, hey, you take that. It was smart. He engaged and got the top player in the world out of the play at the end of the game with 15 seconds left and until the 2-second marker. So if you want to discuss why were there not more penalties called, where there haven't been, in my opinion, enough penalties called this year on Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid. They're two players that, if you look at their penalties drawn per 60 minutes played, they're shockingly low compared to the rest of the players in the league. So I actually thought the one last year in the playoffs was worse than McDavid's, and I also thought Myers was, it's not like Evan Bouchard was engaged with him. He just cross-checked him right in the face, whereas McDavid was embroiled in this battle. I don't even know if McDavid technically got Garland. I know for a fact that Garland didn't have a mark on him after the game. And to Garland's credit, he didn't stay down. Okay? He got up right away and didn't try to sell it or anything. And the irony is Judd Moldaver represents both Connor Garland and Connor McDavid. So, you guys know how the process works in these situations when the hearing takes place. McDavid's in the hearing, Stan Bowman's in the hearing, Judd Moldaver, his agent, is in the hearing. And I do think and I know where you guys are going. I think it's problematic for the league on a bigger issue. They just simply aren't protecting their stars. And I look at the NFL, and maybe they've gone too far protecting the quarterbacks, and especially Patrick Mahomes. The irony of this happening on a Saturday as we're watching the Chiefs in Houston play in 2 BS unnecessary roughness calls and extended drives for Kansas City. They're good enough without getting that. Some might say that was too far one way, and I think the NHL's got to recognize that they're making record-setting profits, record-setting revenue, and we're in a situation here where, this is, it's becoming a star-driven league. Some people should keep that in mind.
Well, so, I mean, you mentioned it yesterday. You referenced Daniel Nugent-Bowman's line that was these two cross-checks happened because the officials didn't do their job. And that's ultimately what it boils down to for me, in that if they called the penalty in the first place, none of this happens. I don't think Connor reacts the way that he does. Myers doesn't have the opportunity to cross-check Bouchard in the face. And we're not having any of these discussions. Other than that, I just personally don't really agree with this ruling from the Department of Player Safety that both incidents were equal. Because I think Myers, like you mentioned, was worse because it was more predatory versus McDavid was seeking revenge for feeling wronged by the officials, which he was in that situation. And I think ultimately that matters, and it's mattered a lot in previous rulings from the Department of Player Safety, where they factor in a lot of things that are leading to an instance, and they didn't in this case. And that's the problem that I kind of have with it, where I would give McDavid 2 games and Myers 3 games, but if that happens, then the Department of Player Safety is accused of favoriting McDavid, and I think that was their cop-out. We'll just give them both 3 games each.
Yeah. It's interesting that the 3 games are all home games. Imagine if Edmonton was going in as St. Louis and Chicago in 2 weeks from now. A couple things. I mean, probably the easiest thing to do politically is what they did, right? I thought they were both going to get 2-game suspension, so I'm surprised and disappointed that it's 3 games. Again, I don't think it's the same, and I think the tone was set in that game earlier. Like, the Canucks, you guys have been there, right? To Vancouver? Oh, yeah. I think you saw during 2011 when the Bruins played.
That's when I was
Vancouver. Vancouver's a unique market. First of all, I want to just point out they're a well-managed team, the Canucks, well-coached team. They got the second best American player in the league right now, Quinn Hughes, in my opinion. And maybe I should put Zach Werenski there as well, because the best player is Austin Matthews, best American player. They've had 2 of the classiest players of all time in the Sedins. That said, there seems to be a lot of emotion in that Vancouver market over the last 30-plus years. And so, things can get a little wild there. They have before in the past. And it gets fueled up. I don't know what it is, but and that night, the Canucks had 2 crappy performances at home back-to-back. Guys lost, 6-1, 5-1 type thing. And they brought their A game. Ray Ferraro had said on Oilers Now on Thursday when we were in Colorado, the Canucks have an A game or they have a D game. Well, they brought their A game. But they were picking off and running interference on McDavid early. JT Miller was engaged, and he cross-checked Bouchard with about, 10 minutes in the first period, right in the back from behind. And no call, so Bouchard's like, well, fine, I'll give him a slash back. And they called a really soft call. And for me, it kind of started there. I kind of thought that game was being managed a bit, I got to tell you. By I think Wes McCauley's one of the best referees in the NHL, but I thought they had a tough night. And I think it played a factor. I think Connor's had I don't want to speak for Connor on this issue, but you guys saw what happened against LA, the Monday night in Edmonton for the Oilers' lone home game over an 8-game stretch. Got slew-footed by Adrian Kempe. I think that's the cheapest thing you could do on the ice. And it kind of boiled over.
Yeah, so what I don't like, I mean, and Pete knows that hit chat makes my skin crawl, and I hate going through the plays in slow motion and everything, but this Connor McDavid thing and the talk of treatment of Connor McDavid has opened it up to how Connor McDavid is treated differently. And everybody wants to make it about how he gets away with stuff. But if we're opening up this conversation, then we have to point out what you pointed out yesterday, which is that he's 5 billionth in the league in penalties drawn. And the biggest way in which Connor McDavid is treated differently by officials is that penalties are not called on his opponents. So when he is in that meeting yesterday with the Department of Player Safety, speak for him. Where do you think his head is? Because do you think he goes into this saying, like, well, what the fuck now? Are we going to talk about what your boys did out there?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for him because I don't know what he said. I think he's been really good to the league, and I think he's been really important for the league. You know, it's funny. You watched what happened between Boston and Florida. Did anybody bring up amongst the media in Boston, the Greg Campbell, Colin Campbell angle at all? Did that get brought up at all?
No, because we're Greg Campbell people in Boston.
You like Greg Campbell?
Yeah, we like him.
I just knew there weren't. If you take a look at the history of the NHL playoffs, the further it goes round by round, I think there's fewer calls. Okay, this year, like I'm not even saying go back. It's funny. I had a conversation with a Hall of Famer today that had a stint in Edmonton, and you go back to that 05-06 season, they called everything, man. I don't want that either. But I do think if I was Connor, I'd be exasperated. So I have a theory on why there's not more calls, because I don't think officials purposely go out of their way to screw McDavid over, okay? So my theory is this. He's the most advanced player we've ever seen. Is it possible, Pete and DJ, that he's so good and so strong that he powers his way through plays and he's moving it with such pace that the referees aren't quite in position or aren't 100% sure if there's little hooks or little grabs? I mean, a lot of the referees are, former, there's some former youth sports players that are referees and linesmen, former, guys that played in the American Hockey League. This is, in theory, the best crop that we've had in a long time. The one thing that should happen is there's zero accountability in terms of the media because nobody accesses the officials after the game. But if we give the benefit of the doubt that, this is the best generation of refs we've got, we have a 2-referee system, is it possible that sometimes calls just get missed because he's so damn good?
No, I'm a company man. I think they always get it right and they're perfect. And
I got you going there,
everything, baby. The Shield. Respect the Shield. Gary Bettman's our friend.
Gary Bettman is our friend. He said we talk about the issues. Did you hear that?
Yes.
He said we talk about the issues.
So, Pete, what do you think? Is it possible? Like, I don't think that anybody consciously goes into the game and says, I'm not calling anything. I don't think it just, a feel happens for it. Then the players have to read and react, right? Like, if you know that you can test the officials and they're not going to call stuff on McDavid and you can slow them down, as an opposition player, you're going to push that envelope as far as you can. Do you not agree?
I definitely agree with that. And I also agree with what you alluded to before, is that there's no accountability for officials. And that bothers me. And we've talked about it for the past couple of years, is like, why are these guys not available to answer questions after games in which they clearly fuck up? Like, none of this happens if Wes McCauley does his job. Again,
you didn't think Wes McCauley's soundbite was good enough?
And that's another part of it. The guy clearly loves being the center of attention and being a showman. He gives minors to everybody else on the ice for basically no fucking reason as a part of that whole thing. He likes to be in front of the camera. He likes to have his shine. Let him answer a question when he doesn't get a call right after a game. That whole part annoys me so much.
See, here's what happens when you're a team broadcaster. It's a loser's lament to bitch about officiating.
Oh, yeah.
It is, right? It is. It comes across, as... And when you have a good team and you have Like, I'm tougher on the Oilers now because they're a 50-win-a-season team than I was when they were going through. I'm in year 17, and when the team was in a rebuild, and yes, it went too long. The reality of the situation is they just weren't very good. So, how hard do you kick a team like that in the teeth? This team that we're watching right now, I mean, it's got the third best points percentage. This matchup tonight, we're getting robbed of the matchup because McDavid's not playing. But it's number 1 versus number 3 in the league. With Washington and Edmonton, two of the top 3-point percentage teams in the league, the best 2 teams since November the 9th. There's expectation with this, and so they should have a higher standard for what they can achieve, which conversely lends itself, for me, broadcasting the game, it takes a lot of self-discipline not to get angrier during the game when I think there's an obvious foul that's been missed. So again, it comes across like a loser's lament, just like it does if you're sitting there beaking off about a 3-game suspension. But I just don't think I don't think it's fair. I know how much extra McDavid does for the league and for the various league rights holders. And so I find a little bit of it. I find this, when you combine those factors, to be quite exasperating.
I think that the way that McDavid can get back at the league is say, all right, you know what? I'm not doing league stuff. I'm doing independent podcasts. And finally he comes on our show. What do you think, Bob?
I cannot help you with that. Let's put it that way. So,
you've helped us with some stuff. I can't imagine anybody could help get Connor McDavid on this podcast. He would run through these glass windows 2 questions in.
Yeah, no, that's a funny. No, it's funny because when the Oilers, I'm old enough to watch the evolution of the Oilers in the 80s. And I remember them playing specifically the Islanders in 81 and again in 83. And I thought the Islanders got a lot of calls in those series. But I got news for you. By the time Edmonton played Boston in 88-90, I thought some of their veteran players got some veteran calls in those series. And that's what happens is I think, there's been studies done in international soccer because it's international officiating and it's not club level, league level games. The younger attacking fullbacks, as an example, like Alphonso Davies, those guys now he doesn't play that position for Canada, but in international sport, fast guys draw more calls. Because what happens in international soccer is you're not comfortable dealing with the veteran player the way you are if you're working in a league. I'm telling you right now that this is the case. So, I do think over time players do tend to earn the respect of the officials and get more calls. I'm just a little bit surprised in the downturn of calls this year with McDavid and Nathan McKinnon, who for me are the 2 most explosive players in the game. And I'm trying to kind of figure it out in my mind because when a guy's 197th in penalties drawn per 60, that is a bizarre statistic for me.
The worst part of this for me is that we're not seeing McDavid or Myers in the rematch later this week. How much carryover do you think there is from this whole incident into that game with those 2 not involved?
I guess time will tell. I mean, I don't know if the Oilers are built, Pete, to have a lot of carryover. Okay? They have a different type of team. They have a thinking man's veteran team, right? So, I don't know. And Vancouver's got other dynamics that could potentially or potentially not be in play. Like Miller in that game drove a lot of what happened for the Canucks. He was physical. He was taking some liberties out there and frankly getting away with it a little bit. And he had a great game. Like they were the better. So I don't have that question for you. But I will tell you right now, I'm disappointed what's happened. I figured as soon as it happened, it was at least a 1-game suspension. 3 games stunned me.
Well, I got an idea now. You just gave me an idea. The Oilers are without Connor McDavid. They could use a center. JT Miller's on the trade block. He's big, he's nasty, and famously, he hates the Vancouver Canucks. So get him. Get him on board. Get him in the locker room. Have him fight his former teammates. He wants to do that so badly already. So there you go. That's
quite an angle, too, but we have a thing called salary cap. So
Derek Ryan seemingly could be expendable for Edmonton, we've seen. So maybe just the trade is 1 for 1.
That's right.
The trade is 1 for 1. I infamously once heard that before involving Taylor Hall.
And you know what? That trade didn't end up being that bad. So relax, everybody. Everyone was so mean to Peter Chiarelli for that. I do want to know, how does everybody move on from this? Because as an Oilers fan, my fear is that this becomes a distraction and that it sticks with them the whole way and it becomes a Brady versus the NFL thing. And I don't want that.
Well, wait a sec. Did Brady win after the Brady versus NFL thing happened?
He sure did, but he was Brady. And granted, I think that McDavid, I won't piss off Patriots fans.
Sport. Different sport, right? Like different sport. I think that the quarterback in the NFL, obviously, which do they not protect the quarterback in the NFL? I'm just wondering.
They do a little bit. Protect the quarterback in the NFL. A
little bit.
Can't even sneeze on him.
Yes. I think that they have the ability to have greater influence on the game than an individual star forward just because of the nature of the sport. I'll tell you exactly how the Oilers, I'm going down to do an availability here in 10 minutes. And the way for Edmonton to move on is for the players that are playing to rally around and support Connor and play their ass off over the next 3 games. That's the best way you can respond.
I mean, to anybody who does DFS, we're a big DFS show. Leon Draisaitl,
he's gonna have
more
8
than
goals. He's gonna have 8 goals over the next 3 games.
Draisaitl's gonna cement the next 5 hearts over the next 3 games, I think, because that's just what he's done.
He's had an unbelievable season, and we had the McKinnon matchup against McDavid and Draisaitl the other night. I know what you guys were thinking watching Colorado build up a 3-0 lead, Edmonton on the second of a back-to-back, difficult back. You're thinking, no way they're coming back. Well, they did, and you know what? They've kind of mastered the art of coming back, which is why. But they cannot afford tonight to get behind against Minnesota because they don't have Connor. So the next 3 games, they can't be spotting teams 2 and 3 goal leads.
All right. Well, we'll have you on in a few days when they go 3-0, and then it looks like they're better without Connor McDavid. And then not only is he a bad guy, but he's a losing player. I don't think they'll be better.
All right. Awesome. Hey, guys, thanks for your time, and thanks for having me on.
You're the best,
we
Bob.
Love you.
Talk to you later.
We all silly like the mayor.